Hello, investors. This is Todd Thomas, Associate Portfolio Manager with Revere Asset Management. Today is Saturday, September 27th. The time is 10:03 a.m. Coming to you from Boca Raton, Florida to bring you the Revere Roundup weekend walkthrough. Going to the trend gauge, still the four up green arrows on all time frames and leaders. However, we did note yellow cautionary arrows on the leaders as well as the 21 EMA. Several of the follow-through day leaders held up well. However, the recent extension in many AI stocks were met with serious selling pressure and profit taking, and that is why we have the yellow sub arrow to see if that develops into further weakness. The only major index being the equal weight mid cap to break the 21 during the week was the mid cap ETF. And however, by Friday, that did manage to reclaim the 21 EMA and close up around the 8 EMA. So if we get another close above that, that yellow sub arrow will go away. All indexes are currently above the 50 and the 200-day long-term moving average. On the week, extended stocks suffer losses, but the indexes hold support. Going through the returns of the week, the Big Eight, which is the Mag 7 plus Netflix, was down 0.87%. That was primarily led by Amazon, which is down on an FTC fine. The RG8 of the Revere Growth 8 ETF composite was down 1.6%. That was led down by the IBD 50, which was down 4% plus on the week. The S&P was down 0.31. The equal weight was down 0.34. QQQ NASDAQ 100 was down 0.56. The NASDAQ 100 equal weight, however, was up 0.19%, and that was led by semiconductor stocks and semiconductor equipment stocks. The Dow was down 0.15, mid-caps were down 0.5, Russell 2000 down 0.59, 6040 down 0.23, GROTECTION, our flagship portfolio, was up 1.54%, and Turbo was, down 1.54%, and our more dynamic but volatile Turbo portfolio is down 2.49% after three huge up weeks. All right, let's go into what happened last week here. Indexes hit a new high on Monday, but tested support by Thursday morning, close on an uptick. And this uptick, we're going to go down, was because of the PCE price index, which is the Federal Reserve's main inflation gauge. That saved the week, coming in line at up 0.3%, which annualizes to a 2.7% inflation rate. This is while the personal income and spending component came in strong. The October rate cut expectations are now showing 89.8% chance of an October 25 basis points cut. That ticked up with this tamer or inline PCE. Individual stock earning wise, Micron and Jabil delivered strong quarters, but did sell off on the AI stock weakness. NVIDIA on Wednesday announced plans of a $100 billion investment in OpenAI as part of a strategic partnership. Quantum stocks continued to surge as IonQ CEO stated that their quantum chips will make classic GPUs like NVIDIA's Blackwell look outdated by 2027. That remains to be seen. However, quantum stocks are on a tear. Boeing announced several new orders, including the potential for 500 new orders of aircraft to China. Also announced the FAA is granting limited airworthiness certificates for the 737 and the 787 starting September 29th. So that was a major development that caused a spike on Friday. Also, NVIDIA and Alibaba announced a partnership that will see Alibaba integrate NVIDIA's suite of their physical AI development tools into Baba's cloud platform. Baba also announced plans to spend $53 billion over 3 years on AI infrastructure. Sorry about a couple typos in here. It's early. Amazon will pay $2.5 billion to settle an FTC lawsuit alleging deceptive Prime membership sales methods. A couple of things I missed in here. Also, the Trump administration is putting tariffs on heavy heavy trucks as well as cabinets and also semiconductors if the majority of the content is not manufactured semiconductors from the US. So the administration continuing to heavily push semiconductor reshoring to the US. Biggest gainers on the week, even though a big pullback interweek on IREN, it was still up 8.3%. Education stock here up 8. Oil stock and gas proppant stock up 5.5. A couple biotechs as well as the metals continue on here. Taiwan Semi made it on the list this week. AppLovin continues after the S&P 500 ad. On the downside, you can see some bigger names this week than the past weeks. Reddit down 9.2%. Tempest AI on a news failure down 11% after making all-time highs. And ALAB down 19%. ALAB and Credo were big losers this week. On the earnings calendar ahead, Carnival is expected to report as well as Paychex, Nike, which has been in a downtrend, and a couple other small stocks that are notable. Big economic news coming up, starting off with pending home sales and housing prices, as well as the Chicago PMI, consumer confidence, the ADP employment on Thursday, as well as the employment number slate coming out on Friday, as well as capping off the ISM services. So this will be a big week to determine whether a rate cut beyond October will remain in play with the employment situation. Going to the charts now. Indexes as well as the inter-asset correlation. S&P 500 made an interweek high on Monday, traded down on Thursday to the 21 EMA, but closed back above with a strong bounce, holding support here, allowing the bull market to continue. RSP down 0.34%. That traded down also to the 21, or actually the 50-day moving average, and the RSP as well as the mid caps are the reason for that yellow sub arrow. However, it did close and reclaim both the 21 and the 80 MA on the week. Qs, same situation, down 0.5%, bouncing, not quite touching that 21 EMA. Equal weights, which have been relatively quiet and unable to break through that 140.24 high, closed at a new weekly, actually this week here, that last was 140.29. So this is a new all-time weekly high on that index. Let's see, the high here, 141.05, 140.67. So this is a new weekly closing high on the Q equal weight. And again, that was led by several of the semiconductor stocks underneath the surface. Dow down just a fraction here, tested the 21 EMA. Mid caps, this is where the mid caps and the equal weight S&P hit that 50-day, but did manage to close above the 21 EMA into the 8. So again, no follow through here on the mid caps. Small caps tested the 21 EMA, but closed back above that 8. So small caps continuing to consolidate after several up weeks straight, which is pretty normal action. VIX, after spiking almost to 18 in a week, closed at 15.29. So that's a good sign as well. Dollar index rebounded slightly on the week here. That's after a double bottom here from a couple weeks ago and a reclaim of the 50-day moving average. Gold continues with another 2.3%. Again, multi-year run, or continuing to make all-time multi-year highs here. GDX up another 3.2%, multiple weeks up straight there. Silver really leading the charge of all the metals, up 7.2%. As you can see, going back to 2011, you've got these highs of 48.35, still well off those highs. Silver is really in a solid uptrend here. Bitcoin down 5%, building another base. And the total bond market index was down 0.3% on the week as yields on the long end of the curve traded higher. This is also the 20-year bond ETF. That was down 0.13. The 30-year yield was up 10 basis points at 4.766, and the 10-year closed at up 48 basis point at actually 4 basis points at 4.187. So again, after undercutting 4% the week before last, we have come back up and bounced up bottom here, and that is on some better numbers that came out during the week. Mags down 1%, getting into each one of those. Apple in this nice stage one consolidation, up 4% and pushing those highs from back in December of 260.10. This is as the iPhone 17 is expected to be released, and we have an upgrade cycle coming up for the year ahead with new AI features. Amazon, the loser on the week, down 5%, closing in on the 200-day moving average and breaking the 50-day moving average here. Just really a big consolidation, but relative weakness out of Amazon. Microsoft still building in this base, down 1.25%. Meta also down 4.45% in this base, also losing the 50-day moving average as well. NVIDIA up slightly on the week, 0.86%. Actually pretty tight here in this 6-week flat base, and tightening up here above all its moving averages. And after taking a shot on Monday of those all-time highs after announcing, the big investment in OpenAI, backed off, having some resistance up here around that 184.47 level, but still trading constructively. So we'll see what happens over the week ahead. Google backing off from prior week's gap up all-time highs, down 3%, and undercutting that gap, but closing right at that gap. So pretty normal action, I would say. Netflix just tight, and Tesla up another 3.36%, extending its breakout gains from the week before last year, as GROTECTION and ROBOTECTION still are holding that position. Overall, just wanted to point out the IBD 50 here was really the root of momentum names breaking off interweek highs here. Still held above that 21-day moving average, however. Now, just a quick look at the industry ETFs. Platinum, the metal nobody talks about, massive breakout this week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Still well off its all-time highs also from 2011. This is broken out of a very nice base about a month and a half ago here, and it's continued. Not extremely liquid, but you can see all the accumulation and volume here. Silver, again, well off those all-time highs, and that was the second leading ETF of the week. Oil and gas here, though, making a big presence, and this is the IEO, which is the Oil and Gas Exploration Group. And you can see a big breakout above that resistance here, trading now well above these moving averages and getting that moving average flattening in alignment here on the longer 10, 20, 30, and 40-week moving averages into the highest levels since April. So again, notable strength in the oil and gas. OIH also up 5.3%, and that again was led by Halliburton. You can see you got a golden cross, which is going to be occurring this week. The 200-day is still sloping downward. However, we are seeing some turn here in the oil and gas sector. Severely under-owned sector in the indexes too. USO also up 4.7%, XLE. So clearly oil ETFs leading, gold miners, and commodities this week really standing out here. This DBC, again, above all its averages, however, just in one big base here. So definitely some new rotation to keep an eye on. Now, going into the weaker ETFs, uranium backed off after a strong week. XLB, that is the material sector, down 2%. Home builders backed off 2.4%, just shy of that 200-day moving average. We'll see if those can recover. However, economic weakness has been a concern, as well as recent bounce back in yields, although not to alarming levels. Jets down, IBD 50 down 4%, being the worst ETF of the week. Now let's get into our watch list for the week. And this week I did something different. I sorted it by the biggest weekly gainers down to the biggest weekly losers. Intel being the huge standout. This was added to our watch list last week as it broke out of this big bottoming consolidation. And we call this in Weinstein stage analysis, this would be your stage 4 downtrend. This is your stage 1 bottoming base. And now a breakout on huge volume into a new stage 2 uptrend. Again, this is a blast from the past. 2000 levels still yet to be overcome from the internet bubble highs. And this stock has done nothing but languish for decades, trading at 1.57 book value, which Revere could care less about, but really one of the cheapest semiconductor stocks on the market and trading at just a little bit over 2 times sales versus several others trading at 10 and 20 times sales. So this has a runway, folks, and this run could just be getting started. Although extended on a short-term basis, wait for another setup. And maybe what we like to do, again, we talked about Monday, this pulling back after this. This is the NVIDIA investment. NVIDIA invested $5 billion. They're going to co-develop a GPU, CPU combo chip with them. This move back here was the U.S. government taking a stake. Big change taking place, and that's what we look for as catalysts. And this definitely is a stock that we will be waiting to potentially add on a pullback to that 8 EMA. Teradyne, another semiconductor equipment stock, up 12% on the week. A gap and run week. No particular news other than positive news again of semiconductors being reshored to the U.S. And you'll see across the board several semiconductor equipment stocks are doing quite well. Quadruple U in the precious or rare earth as well as uranium continuing its run up 12%. And I put Marvell on this week, although this has been a very frustrating stock. We are seeing what's called these ant indicators. You see these little black marks? That means that this stock has had several up days in a row with very little downside action. You still have this. So this is a cup base. Again, stage 1 cup base, maybe a little handle formation here. But this is notable, this move back above that 200-day moving average. And you do see a positive string of earnings and sales here. Again, I've tried this stock a few times on earnings gaps. This has been very frustrating. However, added to the list this week, although not quite in position. Halliburton in the oil and gas field service area. You can see here, big volume, biggest volume that this stock's traded in quite a long time. Broke this downtrend channel here after this Weinstein stage 1 base into a new potential stage 2 uptrend here. Again, you've got the 50-day moving average below the 200-day. 200-day still downward sloping. However, this needs to gather itself and could be a stock watch. EQT in the oil and gas production area, also bouncing off the bottom of this base. Not quite in position, but again, reclaim the 200-day moving average. And again, as you know, I always like to see strong future earnings and sales growth. And this is a stock that could well develop this right side. And again, like Halliburton, a new potential early entry in this. RGTI in the quantum space up another 9% this week. McKesson in the medical wholesale drug area, new all-time highs, up 8.9% this week. This was most likely on the tariff news, I would imagine, that Trump is tariffing any drugs not manufactured here in the U.S. for national security purposes. Obviously, we've seen several of these national security moves, from rare earth metals to semiconductor reshoring to drone manufacturing. Trump is serious about this. Nebius actually, up another 8.4%. This is a data center name that, besides some of the torrid sell-offs in many of these names, this one held up very well. Irene, we took profits here and sold all our positions in the stock. I sold all my positions into this 48.50 area on Wednesday and sold the rest on Thursday. Other than being massively extended, this is unsustainable. We look at how extended these names are from the 21-day moving average. In this case, this got 40% extended above the 21-day moving average, as you can see below. And the average true range of the stock is around 9.4%. So this was over 4 times extended above that 21-day moving average, which is a offensive sell rule for us. And this did pay off. Now, again, this could be fine, and it could build a base or resurge and go right back up through the highs. But we had a substantial profit on this from this pullback buy right here, both in Turbo and Toddzilla. So getting in around 26.50, selling around 48.5. AVAV, a Toddzilla holding here. Once again, this was bought on the reclaim of the 50-day moving average here on this day. And this looks very good. Looking to add into this position, but traded very tight all week above in the pivot zone. Again, this is a drone manufacturer, triple-digit sales ahead, and also a couple triple-digit earnings quarters ahead, and breaking out of the stage 1 base. Valero Energy in the refining area just continues to break out and look quite strong, coming up against these 2024 highs. Phillips 66, another refinery, broke out this week, up 7.5%. Refining group definitely showing relative strength. AMAT in the semiconductor equipment area, up 7.2% on the week, closing out the week at all-time highs into the pivot zone. Again, if Intel's going to be building new chips and we're reshoring semiconductors, semiconductor equipment companies are going to have a backlog of orders. And this is showing up in the charts now. Kratos Defense, this is the drone leader. Very extended, but closing out the week at the highs. Unfortunately, I chose AVAV, which is working, but this one would have been the better choice. Baker Hughes, another oil machinery service stock, breaking through all-time highs this week, up 6.7%. And extending out of the breakout point also this week. Williams, another oil and gas integrated producer, breaking out of this very tight multi-month base this week. You can see right up into the pivot zone. This is another refining stock, which also broke out this week. Gold stock continuing, extended. Alibaba took some offensive profits in this for Toddzilla. Turbo also, I believe, may have taken some offensive profits, but nothing wrong with this. This is a fresh multi-year breakout. You know, again, in the Weinstein stage analysis, stage 4, followed by a stage 1 bottoming base, and now a new stage 2 uptrend that's looking at the monthly chart. Breakout of this base pattern and extension into the profit zone. So I definitely took some off the table, but this hasn't even traded back to its ADMA. Again, Alibaba is now the big AI leader in China, along with Huawei, which is not a publicly traded company. But NVIDIA doing deals with them creating their own AI chip, that's the catalyst for the new factor in Alibaba. This is a oil field proppant management system for fracking. Okay, this is a breakout in the new all-time highs. That Solaris, this was added to the list last week. This is another semiconductor equipment stock breaking out into new 52-week highs. Pan American Silver, as silver continues, so does Pan American, which is a leading silver miner. ERJ, the Brazilian aircraft manufacturer, setting up in a pretty tight base here. Global orders for passenger aircraft are off the charts. Boeing has just a massive backlog. This is getting tight. Again, VCP patterns. We talk about these, where the contraction down into the base, you got a bigger percentage drop, second contraction, smaller percentage drop, third contraction, and then finally tightening here. Breakout over last week's high of 60.13 could be an entry. LEU, a TurboTection holding up 3.69%. Turbo did some offensive selling into this on Friday. However, this is a fresh breakout. There was positive news that they're developing a plant in Ohio, and that sent the stock into new highs. Again, this is the only U.S. enriched uranium company. They enrich HALEU uranium, which is integral for the development of small modular reactors. This is a battery stock put on the list last week. Maztec in the heavy construction area up 3.5%, continuing. First Solar is stock we're watching. A little bit choppy, but you can see here, let's look at a monthly chart. Had this pullback for a couple of years. Definitely showing some relative strength starting to rise on this. Earnings looking very strong. A triple digit quarter in there, 70 plus, 1950, 35% earnings growth. Definitely a stock on the watch list. BWXT, this is a nuclear reactor builder for submarines and naval ships, as well as small modular reactors. This is building a beautiful stage 2 cup, and again, should be on the watch list, as we are definitely in shortage of electricity in the years to come. Carmen, new IPO continuing. Tesla continued, we talked about that. Rhythm Pharmaceuticals bouncing off the 10-week this week. Taiwan Semi new highs. AppLovin continues its run from the S&P ad. Sienna, another blast from the past, coming up into far from all-time highs, but back into 1999 levels. Huge month, up 51%. Huge week, up 2.5%. This is clearly Sienna and Light are both companies that serve the telecom market, and both of these stocks are really cooking right now, as the big telecom stocks as well as the data centers are using their fiber products. FTI in the oil and gas service area up 2.4%. This is extremely tight here and looks good too, as another name in that oil and gas area. Relative strength rising, and certainly one in the new high territories, which is rare for that group. Next tracker in the solar area, new all-time highs on that. This is definitely the leader in solar. Airgain in the heavy construction area up 2% and continuing into that pivot zone. Take Two, Electronic Arts is being taken private. That fueled Take Two for a new all-time high. ASM Lithography is a major semiconductor equipment company, and that is building this big stage 1 cup base running up the right side here. KLAC new highs here 2 weeks in a row. Hallmet Aerospace building this nice cup base. Century Aluminum here broke out last week. We had that on the list and held tight this week. EME and the heavy construction and building and maintenance group building a flat base here, and watching this name closely. I have AMD on the list. This is really a stock that needs to get above the 50-day moving average, but with semiconductors starting to show relative strength, this stock to me is building up support. And this support incidentally goes back to 147 back here. You can see that. and it had this big reversal candle off of that support here. So this is getting tight, and I would buy a move through that 50-day potentially as a starter position. Lam Research, another semiconductor equipment maker, breaking through those all-time highs from last spring, 3 weeks in a row now. HIMS, coming up with earnings here the month after next, building a base here, a new stage one, very choppy. This isn't quite in our liquidity wheelhouse, but I want to see, this is another equipment maker in the semiconductor area, earnings in 5 days, so next week. They have announced several new orders for their burn-in test equipment from hyperscalers, which is a new market for them. So I've got this on the list. This is just shy of that turbo $60 million average daily volume, but I do want to see the earnings in this name. TEL in the fiber area, very tight. Rambus in the storage area, 2-week tight. Uber continuing along this base. INOD, this was a big move, building out what needs to be a base before I would get involved with it. But basically a 2-week tight here, very strong. Roblox, relative strength making new highs, and definitely some institutional sponsorship here as the Fidelity Contra Fund has been building a position in this name. You can see over here, every quarter, Danoff building a position in this. So that's notable. And if you look at the monthly chart, this is really kind of stalling right around these all-time highs back here and building this big base, stage two. Corning Glass, just a name that's extended right now, QBTS in the quantum area, 2-week tight. Celsius is a name that had the big earnings gap. Announcement of a further investment from Pepsi. Elliott Management wants to get on the Pepsi board and divest some of these side beverage distribution agreements they have. However, that broke below the 50-day, held the 65-day exponential, as well as this earnings gap, okay? Reclaim the 50-day. Pullback buy setup. CCJ, a Toddzilla holding, flat on the week. Had a nice reversal off of that 21-day moving average this week, but closed slightly down on the week. HSAI, kind of a 3-week tight here. This is a Chinese LiDAR manufacturer here. And we see it often where these stocks come up into these new high areas and consolidate for a few weeks and potentially break out in the weeks ahead. Again, this is what I love to see, the triple dig and over 25% sales growth. So another potential China name. TKO, another big earnings and sales grower on the list. DoorDash tight, GROTECTION holding, building a cut base. TeraWulf, another data center name, which held very tight here on the week. Closed just shy of its ADMA, but held the 21-day moving average. This is that New York zero carbon data center that Meta or one of the hyperscaler groups put a ton of money into on this move, and it's just consolidating nicely. That's a name to watch. MongoDB, after a big earnings gap here, pulled into that 21-day moving average and is holding. I had a position in this, but once this relative strength just starts flattening out and it breaks the ADMA and the market starts getting a little funky toward the leaders, I punted this for a break even, but the stock still looks pretty darn good. Seagate backing off after a multi-week run. You know, I look at these monthly leaders, and this is why I pay attention to these monthly gains. This was a huge 7% gain after a reversal, then a 29% gain that month, 22% gain this month, 8.7, 6.6, and then last month or this month at 79% or 29%. So these often run multi-months once they get going. SoundHound backed off, just an AI name I'm following. VST in the wholesale energy group, looking for that possibly to tighten up here. Coupang, a new Toddzilla holding off that 20-day moving average here Friday. This is a This is another name that Will Danoff from the Fidelity Contra Fund has been building a position in. You can see 3 quarters in a row now of an increasing position, and also a Stan Druckenmiller holding. So when I get these two behemoths on my side, I'm looking for an entry after this cup breakout and a pullback. Again, I got a very tight stop here below Thursday's lows. That would be about a 2.5% stop loss. And I would start selling if it broke that for a very small loss. So just start a position here and coupang for me. Robinhood, we're still all holding this down 2.4% on the week. This is another medical stock looking pretty good. Snowflake, Don is re-entered this position and trading nicely along that 21-day. So we'll see if that can gain some momentum here. Palantir, GROTECTION holding backed off about 2.6%, building a nice cup base. Later stage base, however, cup with handle here. Wayfair, nice supporting action on the week, pretty tight. Baidu, after this big breakout, pulled back about 2.9%. This is another AI China leader that one could potentially look to get into on these 8-day moving average pullbacks. Obgo setting up as a potential buy off the 21-day moving average here, if you like that name, which is again one of the mega caps now, $1.5 trillion market cap in the semiconductor equipment area. Incidentally, they are the leader in these custom AI chips. You've got MRVL, which is the small second place player in that area that I talked about here, with a big weekly gain up 12%. But Obgo is by far the behemoth in this group. Micron was not able to gain any traction after earnings, but it did have a big move going into these earnings. Backed off, again, some strong earnings and sales still ahead. CLS extended. CoreWeave, this is a Toddzilla and TurboTection holding, and lost the 8 EMA, but we expect this with this name. You still have this 50-day moving average pointing downward. We may need to test this 21-day moving average, and you've got a lot of overhead resistance in this name still, but we're still holding this. CrowdStrike with a potential entry off of that cup with handle base into the 21-day moving the 8-day moving average. SE, this is a name I sat in here, bought in this post-earnings gap, just didn't go anywhere. So again, once it breaks the 80 MA, I'm selling it for basically a very small profit here. Move on to the next or let it reset up again. IONQ down on the week. This is another power conversion stock that was down 4% on the week. Light, a Toddzilla holding, did some offensive selling up here and took a little bit off as it broke that 80 MA, but boy, did that bounce back nicely on the week. Only closed down 4.7%. So relative to some of the other names coming up, you'll see that did quite well. SanDisk. Alex from our team caught this big move, and really this could be very early. Definitely kind of a high tight flag potential here. SoFi backing off. Pure Storage, another storage stock that just had, again, we look for the ability for a stock to gap and run, pulling back into the 21 EMA. This could be a potential entry as it tightens up along that 21 EMA. MP Materials, very disappointing. Bullish engulfing pattern on Thursday. Gave back all of it on Friday. Definitely a weird stock, but held the 10-week moving average, so we're still holding this. A break of that 50-day moving average, though, would kick us out of it. But again, we do like this stock as it's the leader in rare earth U.S. manufacturing with triple-digit earnings and sales coming up. SiteTime, another fabulous semi down on the week. Oracle, Toddzilla, stop out this week. Again, I bought this off of that 8-day moving average, rallied sharply for 3 days, and then reversed. Sold it on the break of the 8 EMA for a partial, and then sold the rest on the final break as it wasn't able to hold that low. Again, nothing major here, but just disappointing action after that big spike, but still a stock that's growing their earnings sales in the large cap, mega cap side. They've pulled back 8%. Symbiotic, relative strength making new highs, down 8%. Needs some tightening in a setup, but this is a robotic stock we're watching. Reddit took some off as it broke this 8-day moving average. Again, I bought some of this in the pre-market on this earnings gap and added to it back here, so I've got a pretty good gain on it. But I am holding my core position as it bounced right off that ADMA, and that's what you want to see. This has earnings coming up in a month and a half. I am going to try to hold this through a pullback, as I do have a nice gain on my core position. Tempest news failure this week on positive FDA approval. I can't remember exactly what, but this shook down to the also the 10-week moving average, so we'll see how it sets up there. Credo, it wasn't if but when this thing backed off, and you've got a pretty big sell-off here this week, down 15% and 19% off its all-time highs. But this probably needs a base at this point. Bloom Energy, same thing, down 17%. Turbo did a nice job selling this into strength and sold the rest of it on this gap down. They made huge profits on this name, but still looks good on the monthly stock chart. Oklo, another turbo name, down 18%, but they sold that into strength. A-Lab, also down 19% on the week and 24% off its all-time highs. Sold this as it broke the ADMA this week. Held a small position in it and sold the rest on the break of the 21-day. So got stopped out of some names this week for sure, which we're just riding these and seeing how far they could go. This is another name that most likely builds a base. And that is it for the watch list. Thank you very much again for watching the weekly review. Again, my name is Todd Thomas. My email is todd@revereasset.com if you have any questions. We appreciate our follows on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @ToddMichael70. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate likes, shares, and subscriptions. Thank you and look forward to talking to you next weekend.